Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Justin Voigt, and I'm the event manager here at Hawker Brownlow Education. And thank you for taking your time out of this afternoon to attend this webinar on PLC at work. So what I'll do first of all is I will hand you over to Sonia McKenzie, who is the General Manager for Events and PD here at Hawker Brownlow.
Thank you, Justin. So welcome everyone to the PLC at Work webinar. I'm Sonia McKenzie. As Justin has just said, I'm General Manager of Professional Learning at Hawker Brownlow Education. Today also we have with us Julie Canham, and Julie is Principal of Shailer Park State Primary School. She'll be sharing her knowledge and insights today with you around the implementation of PLC at work within her school context. So today, the session objectives are really for you to build on your understanding about the PLC at work model, to discover the impact that the PLC at work model can have on teachers and teaching, students and learning and parent engagement within an Australian school context, and have an opportunity to connect with Julie and ask questions from her model PLC school. So our agenda today, I'm just going to start, Julie will share some of her insights into implementation of work at Shailer Park Primary School, and as Justin has said, we'll have probably 10 or so minutes at the end for time for questions. So the way that questions will be answered, if you post them through the chat function, we will select a few questions to be answered and then share them, ask Julie or myself to share them. So I'm going to hand over to Julie Canham in a moment. So as I said before, Julie is the principal of Shailer Park State Primary School. They have been a PLC for 6 years now and are also recognised as a model PLC at work school through Solution Tree, American company. So they've gone through a process to show that they meet the levels of the PLC model school, PLC at work model school. And so I hand over and thank very much Julie Canham.
Thank you, Sonia, and certainly an enormous thank you for having me today and for letting me tell the story of Shailer Park State School and our journey on about school improvement over the last few years. So I think firstly, one of the things that I'd like to talk about is, and very briefly, is learning by doing, that the DeFores are well renowned for around PLC at work. So they're model around professional learning communities. So I'm going to briefly give an overview over the 3 big ideas of a professional learning community. So the slide in front of you, you can see that there's the Learning by Doing book, and that's actually the revised Australian book. We didn't use that one at the time. We actually used the American version of that book because it was 6 years ago, but I would certainly encourage you all to have a look at that book, Learning by Doing, here in Australia, because it is about our specific context. So essentially, a PLC at work is around 3 big ideas. So the first one is learning. It's also around collaboration and then results. So as a PLC, we accept learning as the fundamental purpose of our school. And all of the staff are prepared to examine everything within our school in light of what their impact is on student learning outcomes. The second big idea of a professional learning community is around collaboration. And I think there's a lot of talk, particularly in Australia, and I know here in Queensland, around intended collaboration versus cooperation. The term professional learning teams is certainly thrown around a lot as well. But in a PLC at work school, we really cultivate a collaborative culture, and that's through high-performing teams, and the teams do a lot of the heavy lifting in the school. The third big idea is around the basis of results. So all teachers in schools and all schools, I think, have extremely positive and genuine intentions around education. That's why we're educators. But as a PLC, our focus is on the actual results, looking at evidence collectively. And I think that's one of the differences between a traditional school and certainly a professional learning community. So it's about seeking relevant evidence and information, and then using that information to promote continuous improvement. Within the big idea of learning, and lots of people I know have heard around the 3 big ideas and the 4 questions. Within a focus on learning, there are 4 specific questions that our collaborative teams here at Shailer Park State School focus on, and we continually focus on these questions. It's not where you address the questions at the beginning of a unit or beginning of a term. This is a constant conversation that happens in our collaborative teams. So the first one is around what do we want students to learn and know? The second question is around how do we know if they've learnt it? And then questions 3 and 4 is really around our response. So how do we respond when students don't learn, and how do we respond when they do learn? And that for us was certainly a huge body of work that we needed to do at Shailer Park State School. And I'll talk more about the context and be very honest with you and authentic around our school context. So one of the reasons why we decided to really push forward with our work as a PLC at Work school was by taking time to examine our current position. So if I look back to 2014, when I became the principal here at Shailer Park State School, our school was certainly characterised by those dot points in front of you. We had a lot of long-term and short-term suspensions for our students. So the behaviour of students really needed to be addressed. And the behaviour was for all sorts of reasons. Our school opinion survey data certainly showed that there was very low staff morale amongst our teaching and non-teaching staff. We had minimal parent engagement in the learning partnership with our parents and carers and our teaching staff. Our school had once had close to 1,000 students. It had declined to approximately 340. So significant decline because of reputation in the community. Curriculum to the classroom, which is a very Queensland planning model. So for all of the Queenslanders, they will know what I'm talking about. But curriculum to the classroom was a level 4 planning that had been designed by our distant education schools, and it was very specific planning at that lesson level. Well, that planning that had been devised by EQ was actually being delivered in classrooms at a lesson level. So teachers were taking a printed off lesson and delivering that lesson. We had minimal levels of data analysis and discussion. And the only focus was on summative assessment. There was no focus at all on formative assessment. I've also put up a slide, and this slide is in the public domain. So this was just off the My School website, so anyone can access this. And you can see really clearly in 2014, we were certainly an underperforming school. In 2018, which really 4 years is a very short time in a school improvement journey, there's the total opposite. We were above the nation in many of our Year 3 NAPLAN results, and certainly close to for most of our Year 5 data. So the data within NAPLAN, which I know is only one set of data, and that's only looking at mean scale score, that isn't looking at our upper 2 bands or our national minimum standard, you can see there was a significant improvement around student learning outcomes. And that is as a direct result of working as a professional learning community. So I'm just going to talk through some of the impact. As I said, from that school context, you could see that we were a very broken school. So we worked incredibly hard on having a shared vision, really talking about what was our moral imperative around education. And to be honest with you, this didn't just happen through one conversation or one student-free day. This was an ongoing body of work that we needed to ensure that we were all on the same page. And again, this isn't just teaching staff. It was all of that non-teaching staff, the administration team. Everybody needed to be on the same page around what our shared vision is. And our vision is success for all, where learners come first. And certainly our students know that, our parents know that, our teaching staff and non-teaching staff know it. But as well as knowing it, everybody lives it. There was an obvious data improvement around our A to E data, so that's on our report cards. I was very impressed by the improvement in our SDA data, so our behaviour data. So not only did our short and long-term suspensions decrease, children were actually articulating that they were coming to school to learn. That was the purpose of coming to school, was to learn. Our parents and our community supported that notion that children were coming to school to learn, and the focus had to be on learning. We implemented, it's something that I'm really proud of, a very effective response to intervention model. So all of our students are included in that response to intervention. It's not just for students who sometimes find learning challenging. It's for all students, including our gifted and talented students as well. So essentially, an RTI is another body of work that sits within our PLC at Work model, but essentially it's an opportunity for children to relearn something and teachers to reteach. So the staff are responding to student learning in very, very short cycles. CFU is around checking for understanding, and we talk about that we check for understanding every lesson every day. So a student does not leave a classroom without that teacher knowing very clearly whether that child had reached proficiency at the intended curriculum of that lesson. The collaboration and the mutual accountability amongst staff is actually really wonderful to see. And you see it not just in our staff meeting time and our extracurricular activities, but even the conversation in the staff room changed. It changed from blaming children, blaming families, blaming circumstances, to focusing on, according to Hattie, teachers are 30% of the variance within student achievement. So what can I do as a teacher? What can we do as teachers? We all own every student in this year level and in this school. So the conversation went from one that had been negative to one that was incredibly positive, and I think also quite empowering for teachers to recognise that they make a significant difference to students every single day. The increased level of students being able to self-report on their grades was very obvious and is very obvious. Students know what they need to learn. They know how they're tracking in terms of what they are to know and be able to do. The feedback cycles that are taking place make it very clear for students to be able to self-report. And again, if we pull on Hattie's work, we know that the effect size of that is enormous. We talk a lot about within school variance, and I know that when students come to Shailer Park State School, that those students are not entering a teacher lottery. So it's not that some students will be in a highly effective classroom and others may not. Our within school variance is so minimal around teaching and learning and curriculum and assessment, and that's as a result of the collaborative work that our high performing teams engage in every single day. So that's been wonderful to see as well, and has obviously improved our student learning outcomes. One of the other effects of that as well is that we actually have had a significant decrease, and I'm jumping to the last point there. We've had a significant decrease in the requests from parents and carers around teachers for the following year. So teachers are not seen as popular teachers anymore because our within school variance is so small. Parents are realising that it doesn't matter which class their child is in, that they get the best education from any classroom within this school. And not only are the classroom teachers engaged in that space, our learning support teacher is, we have a teacher librarian, so the teacher librarian is involved in that space, and so are both of the deputy principals. So we chose that both of those deputy principals would work in our RTI space, and certainly are year level facilitators for a particular professional learning team as well. Improved teacher reflection, again, I wasn't expecting that when we started this journey around PLCs, but that has come through that collaboration where we have teachers actually reflecting on their practice, but not just reflecting on their practice, being able to identify really specific pedagogies that have made an impact into student learning outcomes. So now what we actually do, and this links to our RTI model, is at Shailer, we will place the most effective teacher with the least effective student at a particular concept. So we're maximising all of our learning opportunities, but it's also job embedded professional learning. So we don't outsource a lot of our PD. So whilst our PD budget is big, a lot of that comes from within the school, where we have teachers holding PD, where we have groups of teachers working with one another, where they are identifying pedagogy, not from things that they think have worked well, but by using evidence, student learning outcomes, to identify which pedagogy has been the most effective. And then sharing that pedagogy with other members of our staff so their capacity as an educator is also growing. So that in its very essence has been wonderful for our entire school community. I mentioned that very briefly before around our improved feedback loops with students. One of the byproducts of those feedback loops, apart from the improvement in learning outcomes, has been around the increased student confidence and well-being. So again, is it the chicken or the egg? We have students that are improving in their outcomes and then improving in confidence and self-esteem, which again, also then improves behaviour. So it's great to see our little people that are growing academically as well as socially and emotionally as well. I've already spoken, I think, considerably around our staff conversations, that they are focused on learning, and we have very much a no excuse mentality. There certainly isn't a blaming culture in this school. We also have had an increased staff participation in our coaching cycles. So we do have a pedagogical framework here at Shailer. We are an explicit direct instruction school around English and mathematics. And then we have an inquiry cycle model for Hassan STEM. So we do have coaches, and our coaches engage in a coaching cycle where there is a coach who models a lesson, then a co-teach, and then an observation with feedback. So there's been a lot more staff participation in that space. And again, I know that that's as a direct result of collaboration. And staff feeling more comfortable. So it's not a supervision model, it's around how are we continually improving pedagogy and teacher practice to improve student learning outcomes. Also, the formative assessment has been, I think, really significant in improving and increasing our staff knowledge of our students and how they learn. So that checking for understanding every lesson every day, but also having common formative assessments across different year levels has provided consistency and has given teachers the platform to be able to discuss results, not intentions, but actual results and evidence of learning. The slide that I've put there really is a summary of where Shailer Park State School used to be. Often we hear that notion that every student can learn, and whilst that's great, we actually say that at Shailer Park State School, every student will learn. Learning is non-negotiable at our school. Now, students learn at different rates and different paces with different supports, and we provide differentiation. But we all have the underlying belief that every student will learn. the focus on teaching has actually moved to a focus on learning. So whilst we're talking about pedagogy, it's the impact that pedagogy has on the learning. It's looking at the evidence, what has worked and what hasn't worked. We're not doing what we've done for a decade or 20 or 30 years because that's what we know. We're saying, how does this pedagogy impact the learning outcomes for kids? Was it effective or wasn't it? We've certainly moved from isolation, where teachers were delivering a curriculum to the classroom at a lesson level in their classroom on their own, and sometimes even with the door closed, to a space where we are highly collaborative. Not only are the teams working horizontally as year level teams, but there's an enormous amount of vertical collaboration as well. That is at a year level, level coordinator space, as well as then amongst teaching teams. So everything that we do is collaborative. And to be honest with you, some of the teachers now are so frightened of being transferred to another school because they don't want to work in isolation. They've seen that working in a collaborative team is a far more effective way to work, but far more positive as well. Our assessment, and I spoke around the fact that we had a focus on summative assessment, whereas now our focus is on assessment for learning. We still have summative assessments. That's a requirement of our department. And we also see that there's a balance of still having those summative assessments with our guides to making judgments as well. Rather than selecting and sorting students for intervention and enrichment, so once upon a time, our learning support teacher would withdraw a group of students who were struggling with a concept, and that teacher would work with half a dozen students around a concept. What was actually happening was that the learning gap between those students and the rest of the cohort actually increases, because you're pulling them out of a classroom where the teacher's continually learning with the other students. So the learning gap increases. We don't do that anymore. We actually have a pyramid of intervention and enrichment, which we call GLOW time at Shailer Park State School, and it stands for Great Learning Our Way. So that's our RTI model. Our old focus, sometimes we did let students fail and teachers fail, and we say that failure is simply not an option at our school because our vision is success for all, where learners come first. I think that this is really imperative for any school who is on a journey or contemplating entering any type of school improvement, that becoming a professional learning community is a journey, not a destination. So whilst we have been doing this for 6 years and we've been given the stamp of approval from the experts to be allowed to call ourselves a model school, we continually reflect and change what we do. We're currently just looking at our guaranteed and viable curriculum and looking at how we can improve on question number 1 around what it is we want kids to learn. So our RTI model has changed in our senior school in response to the cohorts of children that we have here. So this is certainly a journey. It's not a destination where you start and finish, but it's also not an add-on. So this is not a program. This is not something that we do on top of what we have always done. We actually have a different way of working, a new way of working, but I would say a far more effective way of working. And that's certainly evidenced in our student learning outcomes, a decrease in our behaviour, an increase in the satisfaction levels of all of our staff, our parents and our students. So has it been challenging at times? Yes, but it's absolutely, if you were to ask any of the teachers or non-teaching staff or students, they would certainly agree, I know, that it has been the best journey that we've ever taken in our school.
Okay, thank you, Julie. That was extremely informative and extremely inspiring, I must say, as well. We do have time for questions, so there's a few that have popped up here. So the first one that we've got here that I'll ask you, Julie, is how did you decide on what was the most effective pedagogy for teachers to engage with?
So we did a lot of research. We actually, and we still use a lot of John Hattie's work and the meta-analysis that he has engaged in. So certainly, and I think that's one of the points, you know, John Hattie has put that his top, that collective teacher efficacy now has the greatest effect size of 1.57. So we certainly looked at his meta-analysis and identified his top 10, and the work around a PLC at work are in his top 10. So our response to intervention, you know, John's got that as a 1.29 effect size, feedback, teacher clarity, formative assessment. So John's work has certainly guided us into this work around a professional learning community and RTI model.
Okay, thanks, Julie. Another question for you. There's a few coming. So how many people did you include when you first started the process of setting up PLCs? So I'm assuming that question is, did you include whole staff, teaching and non-teaching, or did you choose a select group when you first started?
We actually started with our teaching staff, and we really began with them, and it wasn't a quick process. It was really around, you know, building a guided coalition. So one of the first things that I did was collate all the different data sets with the deputy principal and put those data sets in front of the staff to say, are we okay with this? So that NAPLAN data, does this sit okay with you at night? 50% of our kids failing maths and English, does that sit with you at night? Are you okay with that? Because I certainly wasn't. So we started with all of our teachers, and I presented all of the data that I could get my hands on, and everything, like I said, from NAPLAN, A to E, school opinion survey data from teachers, parents and students. As well as then I also spoke to groups of students to see if they were happy as well with what was happening.
Okay, great. So data was a really a big factor in, you know, you working with staff to be able to get that guiding coalition in the beginning. Definitely.
And just showing our reality. I actually think that there were some people who, you know, as a classroom teacher in their isolated classrooms, they were only aware of their student data in their classroom. They weren't aware of what our data story looked like as an entire school. So for some, it was a surprise. And Sonia, it was challenging. People did get upset. People did get angry. But we had to confront the truth.
Yeah. So it was really shaking up people's mental models and perceptions of what was happening at the school.
Yeah, and asking them, why did they put their hand on the gate every day? You know, why did we become teachers? You know, really digging deep into that space, their moral imperative around why they became a teacher. What was that journey for them like as a professional? And were they satisfied with those data sets that we were doing the best job by our students? And the answer was overwhelmingly no, we needed to do something differently.
Yeah, great. It sort of leads into this next question, which you may have just answered, but were there any resistors? So how did you manage resistors to the change that you were engaging with?
Yes, there was resistors. I'm being very honest. Yes, there was resistors. Now, there were resistors for all sorts of reasons, and I actually have two of the deputy principals sitting here too who chuckled then as well. Of course, there's resistors. You know, managing change as a leader is one of the most challenging things I think that we do, because we're working with people. For some people, they thrive on change. For other people, they find it really scary. So yes, there were resistors. And for us, it was around making sure that we dug into that moral imperative. One really simple thing that I did is that we all made an agreement to some collective commitments. There were 5 collective commitments that we all agreed to, and they actually went up on coloured posters in my office. And I said to everyone, I will guarantee you that if your post-it note for whatever you're asking me for fits on one of those A3 charts, that it can happen. If it doesn't fit on one of those collective commitments, there's a waste paper basket on the floor. And they would come in with their Post-it note and see if it fitted on the collective commitments that we had agreed to. And if it did, great. But if it didn't, it went in the bin. So although that was very simple, what that did was keep us all very tight on what we needed to be tight. And I think that gave some of those resistors the confidence. This wasn't just another program. This wasn't just an add-on. That, you know, we were all serious about changing the way that we worked and changing the culture of our school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a couple more questions here. We still have plenty of time. So the next one for you, Julie, is has the PLC had a positive impact on student and staff wellbeing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anecdotally, I can say yes, but as well as that, we do a school opinion survey that's run at a departmental level every year. And our school opinion survey looks at our parent data, our student data, and our staff, so teaching and non-teaching. And there's definitely been an improvement around their well-being. And in terms of the students, they're so clear now on those 4 questions. They are just so clear. They talk about glow. I did a survey around what the favourite part of their day was. And 9 out of 10 students all said that glow time, so our RTI model, was their favourite part of the day. And it was interesting, during that time, we didn't have any behaviours. So there was no behaviour issues at all during that space. So it's definitely had a positive impact on teachers who feel supported, on non-teaching staff who feel more supported in their year level teams, and even the ladies in the office. You know, I think that the morale with them as well is they're more engaged in teaching and learning as well.
So what I'm hearing as well, Julie, is probably a very positive culture across the school.
Incredibly positive, absolutely. This is a wonderful school to work in, a wonderful school to come to. And as I said, Sonia, my teachers and non-teaching staff actually are worried that they may get transferred to another school who don't work this way. And they don't want to ever go back to working in a traditional school.
Yeah. Another question for you, Julie. Mm-hmm. This might be just about the last one. So how often do your PLCs or your professional learning teams meet, and for how long?
Okay, so we do a range of things to support them having the time to meet. So some of the things that we do is we try and make sure that year level teams have their lunch times together. And we're certainly not saying you need to work in your lunch, but what we're doing is providing the opportunity that if they're sitting around in the staff room talking, that they can be together. Also make sure that the hour a week that we are allowed to have for our meeting times after our contact hours, that 45 minutes out of those 60 minutes are for our teams to meet and work on the 4 questions. And so that happens every week. So a lot of, and I think that's been a significant change actually, our staff meeting time was traditionally used for general business and messages. So the way we communicate has changed. So I've been able to free up that time for them to do our core business, which is around collaboration, learning and results. So they use that time. We also try and schedule our non-contact time so that year levels are off together. I certainly don't give them this huge amount of additional time. So I've not put aside in our budget enormous amounts of times for teams to meet weekly, because that's not sustainable, and that's actually encouraging them to keep doing what they were doing, and that this is an add-on. So they get their Tuesday afternoon time. They all choose to meet on a Friday morning as well. And that's just teams making that time because they work differently. So that's a lot of their planning and preparation time is now done collaboratively. So it's more effective. And yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. It's not more work. It's actually focusing on the right work. And therefore, I actually think it's less work, but it's working differently.
So it's working and as being more efficient with time and with the focus of what your conversations or what the professional learning team conversations are about.
Yeah, and Sonia, as the principal of the school, I'm very wary of making sure that not only do I meet industrial law requirements, but the well-being of my staff is incredibly important. They're at the coalface. And so managing their well-being is important. I didn't want to do something that was an add-on. I just knew there was a better way to work. And this is a far more effective way to work, and people are happier, their work is more efficient, and the outcomes for everybody is far better.
Thanks, Julie. And I think the clear message that's coming through there is that this is just a different way of working. It's about, you know, flipping the traditional model of schooling on its head and working in a way that is far more effective for students and also far more empowering for teachers.
Definitely.
So I'm not going to throw any more questions at you. For people who are still on the webinar, you will see that Julie is speaking at our second International Summit on PLC at Work at the end of the month. That's being held in Melbourne. Julia will be sharing her story there. We also have a range of other speakers who are both national and international. And we'll also have, we've got about 6 model schools in the PLC at Work model schools in Australia who will be there to share their stories and there for a chat during the lunch breaks. So I didn't mention before when I introduced Julie that she is the principal of Shailer Park State Primary School, but she is also a Hawker Brownlow Education training associate and can and does work with schools to support them in implementing PLCs. If you are interested in any of our services, you can jump online. I've given you just a little bit of an overview there of some of the things that we do. I'm not going to go through that all with you all now, but we are here to support schools. So we do have Julie, we have a range of associates who can come to your school and work with your school in whatever way suits you to progress you in the direction that you want to go in. Some of our resources as well that you'll find online through Hawker Brownlow Education that support the PLC implementation. So Julie did mention Learning by Doing. We also have work by Mazzano, collaborative teams to transform schools, as well as a couple of other resources there that you might be interested in. So please feel free to join the conversation, follow us. You can contact us. The phone number is below on your screen. If you do want to have a chat just around how we might support you further, please feel free to. So thank you for joining us.